Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Health and Safety Matters podcast. My name's Mark Sennett. I'm the CEO of Western Business Media, which is the publisher of Health and Safety Matters magazine. This podcast is sponsored by the Health and Safety event, which will take place on the 22nd and 23rd of September 2020 at the NEC in Birmingham. And you can register for free to attend the event at www.healthandsafetyevent.com. And this podcast comes out every fortnight on a Monday, and you can download it obviously via iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, or listen to it on YouTube. So we start off with the news this week, as always, and I thought I'd do something a little bit different this time. We haven't covered a prosecution for a while. Prosecution's a bit few and far between at the moment through the pandemic. There's not a whole lot of court cases going on, and they're really being prioritising criminal cases as and when, so things are being adjourned. But there was a rather large prosecution that I wrote up about on the HSM website, so I thought we'd go over that as the first news story this week. So there was a £366,850 fine after a fatal crush. This relates to IFG Drake Limited, and this is after a worker suffered fatal crush injuries while working on a machine at a site in Huddersfield. Leeds Crown Court heard that Javeed Ghaffar was working on a stretch goet selection of synthetic fibre manufacturing machine at Victoria Mills in Victoria Lane in Huddersfield. He became entangled in the machine when he was performing a task of removing a lap from around the rollers. A lap occurs when the fibres stick to the rollers of the machine and they begin to wrap around them. So this is quite common, these kinds of prosecutions. Unfortunately, you often see machine guardings, or in this situation, a lap occurring. And an investigation by the Health and Safety Executive found that the machine wasn't properly guarded. Often the case in these situations, as I was just saying. It'd become custom in this situation and practice for the employees to reach around the inadequate guarding that was in place to deal with this lap. And of course, in this instance, unfortunately, Mr. Ghaffar got drawn into the machine. So, as I said earlier, IFG Drake were prosecuted for breaching Section 2.1 of the Health and Safety at Work Act. They actually pleaded guilty to that, and the company was fined £366,850 and ordered to pay £23,993 in costs. It's worth noting that after the hearing, HSC Inspector John Boyle said this was a tragic and wholly avoidable incident caused by the failure of the company to provide adequate guarding against dangerous parts of the machine. So as I was saying earlier, unfortunately this is an all too common situation of people being drawn into a machine. And this is a pretty large fine as far as it goes for machine injuries. But yeah, as I said at the start, this was a fatal crush. So thus that is represented in the level of the fine. So yeah, terrible story to report there. Only one of a couple of prosecutions that have come out from the HSC in recent weeks. Our next news story I want to talk about is all to do with shift workers. So shift workers are apparently 30% more at risk from injury or ill health. This comes from research from IIRSM, the Institution of Occupational Safety and Health, and they've indicated that shift workers who are working night shifts are approximately 25 to 30% more at risk of injury or ill health than those working in day shifts. The study actually examined 5 aspects of well-being, including chronic fatigue, emotional reactivity, social isolation, stress, and overall health. Researchers found that working a 12-hour rather than an 8-hour shift increases the risk of injury, again by a further 25 to 30%, with risk increasing evenly over 4 consecutive shifts. So that's quite a big increase, 25 to 30%. The study also found that shift workers reported higher levels of chronic fatigue as a result of disturbance of biological rhythms that occur as a result of doing shift work in the evenings. Over many years, the disruption of these biological and social factors, it may have had a negative long-term effects, which is considerable, and there's considerable concern amongst this with COVID-19, with the shift patterns being extended even further in workplaces worldwide. The Royal College of Nursing, RCN, has raised their concerns for healthcare workers who are doing 12-hour critical care shifts. They've actually urged that the risks for those doing 12-hour shifts in critical care environment during COVID-19 shouldn't be ignored and not limited to the following major concerns that they've got. So the concerns that they have that these 12-hour shifts are that wearing PPE for long periods can be physically demanding and result in potential heat stress. Errors when donning and doffing PPE can happen. high levels of moving and handling activity when positioning patients. We can also add to stress and fatigue. Increased time exposed to patients with infection, leading to potential increase in viral exposure. Well, that's pretty obvious, isn't it? That is the main concern for everybody at the moment, that people doing long shift works, working in critical care, are much higher risk of having exposure to this terrible disease. And of course, the obvious here, the longer you work in shifts, the more likely there are to be errors of judgment or safety lapses caused by that fatigue. So it's interesting. You come back to the headline figures there, that overall shift workers are 30% more likely to suffer injury or ill health, and a further 25 to 30% risk increase for those working 12-hour shifts than 8-hour shifts. And of course, the biological situation there, they're saying that in the evenings, if you're doing night shifts, you're far more at risk than just a day risk. So this is something that has long been talked about in the sector, and is something that when you're looking at the jobs that you all do as health and safety practitioners, that role is vastly widening. It isn't just about guarding against injuries and risk assessments in the workplace from obvious injuries like working at height or asbestos exposure. Mental health and well-being is top of the agenda now for people. There's no longer that stigma of workplace mental ill health. Employers, and you of course, are being encouraged to risk assess and to try and protect. We've got a duty of care. I, as an employer, am constantly checking on any furloughed staff that we've got, our current staff that are working really, really hard in our business to make sure that they don't have the additional stress and mental ill health from the pressures of, being at home, the concerns about the economy, the concerns about health. We all know, those of us have children, just how hard it can be to be working while homeschooling and trying to be a parent. So we all do have a duty of care on that side. So it's really interesting, these statistics of shift workers, and the health and safety manager there has got even more consideration. So it's a really interesting bit of research from IIRSM. So now we're going to move from news of one association into our first interview to the day. It seems like a perfect segue here. I sat down earlier in the week with Clive Johnson, who's the president of IIRSM, and I caught up with him to see about how IIRSM is helping its members during COVID-19. And Clive actually has a really interesting practitioner background in the aviation sector for health and safety. So I posed him some questions to do with what he thinks about health and safety in the aviation sector. So I sat down with him in the week, and here's what Clive had to say. Morning, Clive. How are you?
Good morning. Nice to speak to you.
So let's just talk about IIRSM, because you're here to represent them today. Can you tell us your role with IIRSM?
Well, I've been involved with IIRSM for many, many years now, but my current role within IIRSM, which I'm quite privileged to have, is the president of IIRSM. So I've just been in post now since December of last year. So I'm only 6 months into my role, but it's been a very strange 6 months, as we all know, during the last lockdown and that. So current role is president of IIRSM.
I'm not sure that anybody else is going to have a presidency of that association quite like you're going to have to face over these coming months.
Yeah.
But that leads us on nicely to the first question I had for you. IIRSM have been very proactive during this COVID-19 pandemic, but can you just give us an insight on what you're doing to help your members?
I think what we can be sort of quite proud of in terms of supporting our members, well, there's two areas really. One is the amount of webinars we've been able to put in place for all our members in this sort of lockdown world that we're all living in. And they've been really, really well received from a whole different area of sort of webinar sort of topics, which, we're sort of quite proud that we've been get really good attendances on those. So that's helped our members a lot in terms of keeping in touch, and also providing them guidance around getting back into work, post-COVID-19, certain things that we can do. And I suppose that one of the big bits for me is really reinforcing the fact that being a member of IIRSM in the world in which we live, it's around risk management. And never until now, I believe that risk management itself has not been able to come to a forefront until we come into a crisis like we've got, where our professional members have been able to really use their sort of risk management skills to deal with things on a day-to-day basis, where we sort of, to be fair, people have been making things up as we go along because we've never been in a situation like this before. So the competencies of the risk professionals, I think, have really come to the fold under this sort of particular restrictions that we're in.
So what are your views on how people should return to work safely? You know, this is something I've had to think about. I think I said on the last episode of the HSM podcast that some of our staff have returned to the office, those that couldn't do their work properly from home. That was their own call rather than mine. So we've had to take steps to make the office as safe as possible, obviously, because health and safety is a priority. But from a IIRSM point of view, and also from you personally, what needs to be done to ensure people can return to work safely? What steps do employers like myself need to take to make sure that no staff health is put at risk?
Well, without using the sort of cloak of compliance, and I'm not one for banging on about regulations and the like, but you know, the Health and Safety at Work Act quite clearly states that the sort of employer has to carry out his risk assessments, and never before until now, I think, generating a risk assessment to get your people back to work is sort of really up there, to be honest with you. So employers really have got this duty of care to engage with their workforce to provide that safe, secure and healthy environment for them to come back into. And there's lots of things which employers can do, and there's things around, you know, getting your sort of screens in place, getting your specialist first aiders in place. You probably have to revisit your fire plans because you won't be wanting assembly points, you're wanting dispersals. You know, there's a whole host of things which an employer really has to address to bring his workforce back in and give them the confidence to come back into the workplace, knowing that his employer has covered all the sort of bases, and that, I mean, that also extends, I believe, and I know many companies are doing it. They're sending out questionnaires to their workforce to find out if they've been in contact, you know, all these sort of how they're going to travel to work, and then that will give you basically an assessment of whether that person is a high risk or a low risk. So that's a good starter for 10 in terms of identifying your workforce and carrying out the first phase of your sort of risk assessment, really.
You know, in a previous life, obviously, you were involved in the aviation sector, I think, for BAA. That's very topical at the moment in terms of everything from air bridges to quarantine. But from a health and safety perspective, of the people working on massive sites like Terminal 5 at Heathrow, like you did, what are key considerations that you would be having to take now if you were still looking at that role? What were the concerns that you'd have straight off of there?
Interesting. Since the outbreak, I'm very fortunate to be part of the Construction Leadership Group COVID-19 Task Force, where over the last few months we've been generating site operating procedures based on government information to ensure we can get our construction works back onto our sites in a safe and healthy and secure manner. And working with the Construction Leadership Council, we're now being able to issue out the version 4 of how to get construction workers back onto construction sites. And if employers can meet the requirements of the standard, then you can do that. Now, in my day job as working for Derwent London, we've been able to, as a construction client, we've been able to drive that agenda by speaking with our contractors and saying, look, if you want to come back and work on the sites, this is version 4 of the new site operating procedures. Please generate your risk assessments to prove that you can meet all the requirements from it. So industry have done a really good job in getting the industry back to work, if you know what I mean. And these site operating procedures are the sort of keystone, I think, to providing that safe environment and giving people the comfort and confidence that they can work in that sort of environment.
So one of the big topics long before this epidemic, or this pandemic, whatever you want to call it, the British Safety Industry Federation and organisations like IIRSM have long campaigned to say that only certified PPE should be allowed into the market. Only stuff that's safe to use, that is certified, should be used. And we've all seen news stories, whether it's been the government's bought bulk orders of PPE from Turkey that isn't safe to wear. What's IIRSM's take on that now? Are you working with government? Have you been pushing out messages? I presume that this right now is an even bigger area of concern than ever before for you.
Very, very good question. I mean, you hear lots of stories around certain types of non-compliant PPE coming into the country and people trying to sort of make some money out of it. But our advice to our members is there's an organisation called BASF. Crikey, you have to correct me if I'm wrong here, but that's an organisation which sort of supports and promotes only the appropriate PPE, and that's from a hard hat to a face mask. And if it meets these required standards, well then over the years that's where we've always said you should procure from. And I wouldn't stay away from that now. I think we should always go to the appropriate source to get the approved equipment, because it all has to come with its CE marking and its pretty standard and its particular PPE specification requirement, whether it's gloves or eyewear or whatever. So our sort of advice to all our members is you procure from the appropriate source and not try and get something on the cheap that you might look the right product, but it won't be effective.
Yeah, I think the scheme you're talking about there is a BSIF's Registered Safety Supplier Scheme, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
And IIRSM have backed that, and it is massively important now, as we discussed, because with people needing PPE, whether it's key workers or whatever, it's all very well providing PPE, but if it doesn't actually protect you, it's not real PPE, is it? And it can cost people lives at this point. Yeah,
it can. Yeah, and it is personal protective. It should be just used for yourself, and like all the good sort of behaviours around PPE, it's sort of use it, wear it, and dispose of it correctly as well. Because by disposing of it incorrectly, you're adding sort of contaminated clothing into the sort of waste industry, aren't you? So there is a bit around receiving the PPE, wearing it, and then disposing of it properly as well.
So just in closing, I just want to ask you, what's upcoming for IIRSM, and those that aren't members of IIRSM, why would you say they should become a member?
Oh, great question. Thank you for this opportunity, because I'll say I've been a part of IIRSM for many years now, and what IIRSM are doing in terms of the way the health and safety profession has been perceived for many years as a sort of tick box, clipboard type of profession. Ultimately now what the health and safety profession is becoming is we're becoming more risk professionals, and we are more integral and inclusive into any business, and we're part of the business organisation. It's not a health and safety department sat somewhere. Business risk is along with all the other business risks, whether it's financial, health and safety, or whatever. And what IIRSM does is give people the skills and the confidence to work with their employers to demonstrate and show them that health and safety is a business risk, and it can, if it's done properly and risk assessed properly, it can add real benefit and value to the business. Not only from a health and safety perspective, but also corporately in terms of your reputation and the like. So the more and more that IIRSM are promoting itself now, industries and businesses are seeing that, health and safety in terms of a risk management procedure is becoming more and more sat at the board level with all the other business risks. And we are becoming more risk managers than health and safety managers, because we can manage risk on a day-to-day basis, And it's about having the competencies to manage risk, and not this. So I often say it's about being risk aware, not risk averse, but act responsibly. If you've got the competences to manage risk, well, why not take risk on and not be too risk averse? And I think that's one of the reasons why IIRSM is getting into the boardrooms, is because of that approach. And it's not a black and white, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's working with the business to get and mitigate its health and safety risks.
Well, obviously you can find out more information about joining IIRSM from the website, which is IIRSM.org. Clive, thanks for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
No, absolutely. Stay safe and healthy and keep active.
Now we'll return our attention to a couple more news stories that we've had on the HSM website. And as I said at the start of the podcast, you can see all the latest news from the Health and Safety Matters website, which is www.hsmsearch.com. So the next article that I want to cover is very topical, because it's very much in the public domain at the moment, all to do with COVID-19, and that's face coverings are set to become mandatory on public transport. The government has announced that face coverings will be required for use on public transport in England from the 15th of June. Transport Secretary Grant Shapps also stated that wherever possible, people should continue to avoid public transport and walk cycle or drive. But for some people, this obviously isn't an option, and public transport will be the only way that they can get around or to get to work. Transport has been slowly increasing, or the use of public transport, and this obviously includes the tube, and we've seen about a 20% rise in the last couple of weeks in the use of the London Underground. The issue here, the government is stating, is that when you use public transport, you're more likely to be in an enclosed space. Obviously, an example there would be in a tube carriage on the London Underground. And this will mean that there's more chance of people being enclosed longer periods, and there's a greater risk of the spread of the virus, and social distancing is that much harder. That's the reason for it. This differs from other enclosed spaces like shops. The reason for that is, in shops, people are more free and easy to move around with social distancing. There's more space. Obviously not the case on the tube. And shop owners can actually limit the amount of people that are allowed to go in at any one time. The Scientific Advisory Group for Emergencies, which is SAGE, has set out some guidance that says that using face coverings in this setting can provide some small additional protection to fellow passengers and can help people to avoid unknowingly spread the virus. So if they don't know that they're suffering from coronavirus, or they carry coronavirus at this stage and they're not showing symptoms, by using face coverings that will protect other people and around. And that's relevant from what we're covering here, because it's not just passengers, but of course employees of London Underground or London buses or buses in general. So these changes will be made under legislation such as the National Rail Conditions of Travel and Public Services Vehicle Regulations for buses. Those are the legislations where the changes are going to happen to those to happen. And the government expects that the vast majority of people will comply with the changes, but operators will be able to refuse travel or issue a penalty, in that sense fines, for anyone who fails to wear a face covering. So this is a similar way as having rules in place for fines if you don't have a ticket for a train or a bus. So it's exactly the same method of thinking there, and the British Transport Police will be able to support the implementation of these charges. Social distancing and hand washing, of course, remain the most important disease prevention. But as we can see here, the face covering side of things isn't just there to stop you if you are showing symptoms, but it's if you haven't got symptoms that are obviously showing. So it's to protect passengers, to protect employees, and it makes sense. So this is something, as I said at the start, is coming in from the 15th of June. And as the R rate is something that's very much under the microscope at the moment, we need to keep it beneath 1 to prevent what we would always call as a second peak or a second spike in these situations. So this is ultimately the new normal that we're facing for a while, and it seems to be very sensible advice, and I thought it was something that was worth sharing. So while we're on the respiratory side of things, the HSE has given more guidance in terms of the importance of fitting respirators correctly. This isn't really massively new news, but the HSE came out and sent a reminder that we covered this week, and they've said if a respirator is incorrectly fitted, it won't only not provide you with protection, but the HSE is advising that healthcare workers currently using respiratory protection equipment, so RPE, on the importance of ensuring that it's fitted correctly. Tight-fitting respirators rely on having a good seal with the wearer's face, and a face fit test should be carried out to ensure that RPE protects the wearer. So this is just really a quick reminder on this front that we've covered before. The British Safety Industry Federation, the BSIF's view on this, they really lead that in terms of the fit to fit scheme, and you can find out more about that by going to the website, which is www.fit2fit.org, and that's 2 with numeric 2, fit numeric 2 fit.org. And in fact, we have done a number of webinars and articles with the BSIF in the past on this, and right now more than ever the BSIF are really pushing out the message, making sure only certified and safe PPE is out in the market. And we did a webinar just recently with them on that and had 1,500 people take part. And if you've missed that, you can still watch it on demand. You just go to our website, hsmsearch.com, and in the top navigation there is a webinars tab. Click on that and you'll see the C guidance webinar with BSIF, and you can actually get an hour of CPD by watching the on-demand service. So do watch that. It's completely free to register and get yourself an hour of CPD. It's well worth it, and we've got a number of other upcoming webinars. We've just done one last week with Southall's, which was the top health and safety tips in 2020 for manufacturing, and we've got one coming up in July, on July the 7th at 10:30 a.m, which is all about making sure that you can do work at height safely, and that's in partnership with 3M. So that's at 10:30 on the 7th of July, and you can register for free for that simply by going to our website, hsmsearch.com, and you'll be able to get a CPD hour for attending that as well. So now it's time to move on to our final guests for this episode of the podcast. We're doing a little bit different. Normally we would talk to a supplier or a manufacturer, and this time we're speaking to She Software, but not just one member of She Software, but actually two. Julian Taylor, who's an expert at She Software, has done a number of webinars with us in the past, and I was just talking about the webinars, and you can obviously watch them on demand. But we're also delighted to be joined by Matthew Elson, who's the CEO of She Software. And I sat down with both Julian and Matthew earlier in the week, and they told me all the steps that She Software are taking to help clients be able to return to work safely in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic. And here's what they had to say. Morning, Matthew and Julian. How are you both?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Yeah, good, Mark. Good to be speaking again.
Yeah, it's great to see you again as well, Julian. Obviously, we've done a lot of stuff together in the past. We've done a number of webinars with She Software, and if anyone wants to listen to them again, you can do on demand. You just go to the HSM website, which is hsmsearch.com, and click on the webinars tab. We've done some 2 or 3 together, and they're really insightful, so I do urge everyone to take a listen to that. But Matthew, can I just start off asking you a question, if that's all right? I want to talk about She Software. So what services can She Software offer to help during the current COVID-19 pandemic?
Yeah, I guess COVID came as a sudden shock to everybody in March, with customers facing a whole new set of challenges. Initially, tracking illness, controlling visitors, but then very quickly we went to lockdown, and there was the challenge of how do we cope with remote working and keep in touch with our employees and maintain morale. And now, of course, everybody's thinking about safe return to work. So we're very lucky that we have a highly configurable solution. And we were immediately able to create a whole bunch of relevant content and forms and work processes that we published in a portal to our existing customers. So they could pick that functionality up, plug it into their solutions, and meet those evolving needs. We got such great feedback on our responsiveness that we were encouraged to create Assure Response. So Assure Response it really brings the best of Assure, specifically targeted at the acute current needs, which now, of course, is mostly about return to work. And Assure Response is available free to use for 60 days from our website, shesoftware.com, to new customers who are facing these unprecedented challenges.
So, Julian, is there anything you want to add to that at all?
I think what I'm going to add, Mark, is actually I've heard a lot in recent times. I've heard a lot of people talking about the new normal. And we've got to a point, actually, where we're thinking it's actually the same normal. So the world may have changed, and we may have to do things differently because people are maybe working from home or they're having to work on site in different ways. But actually, that key focus of good risk management still applies. So we still have to do the same thing as good health and safety professionals. So I think sort of one of the key focuses we've had throughout this is sort of, as Matthew has touched upon, is supplying or deploying really good mobile tools. But it doesn't mean wherever you're working from, you can still engage with health and safety in a really simple and a really easy way. So if we start to think about that return to work, for example, people could submit a health check on a daily basis before they actually come to the site. So it means that we can proactively be managing some of the issues around or some of the risks around COVID rather than actually doing it in a proactive manner once somebody's actually turned up at our door, for example. So I think one of the key things is really make it simple, make it easy, and those mobile tools, so that we can drive a really good flow of information around COVID and the things we need to be doing to manage it effectively.
So following on for that, what's next in the pipeline? What's next for She Software over the coming months?
Well, for us, it's been a great learning experience publishing Assure Response, because we've had the challenge of bringing lots of new customers on quickly and helping them to get best value from the solution. I mean, it's clear that customers have a high expectation to understand and realize the value in their software as quickly as possible. So our pipeline is focused really on building on what are already our great strengths, which is about configurability and the strength of our user interface. It's all about making it easier for customers to adopt Assure and get great value from the functionality that we offer.
So what's the biggest challenge facing your business and also the health and safety sector as a whole? What do you think the biggest challenges are as we move out of this pandemic? Hopefully move out of this pandemic, I should say.
Well, I think from a sector perspective, Mark, actually, I think we've talked often enough in the past, and you know my passions, which is about leadership and around engagement. And I still believe from a lot of the conversations that we have with organisations that remains the big challenge. It's the big thing that we need to fix in health and safety is around better leadership. So we commonly see small health and safety teams who are working very diligently to change things, but actually they're a small voice in a big organisation. I think the pandemic has changed that to a certain extent in terms of health is now something that is firmly on the sort of horizon or sort of on the discussion points for leadership. But I think where we have to go as a sector is driving better leadership, driving world-class leadership around health and safety, because even in 2020, we still suffer massively from things like underreporting. And again, when we think about COVID, managing that effectively is going to be about getting good information. If we get good information, we can make good decisions. So we need engaged people. But actually, the style of our leadership in our organisations defines whether we have those engaged people or not. And I think I've said it before on one of our webinars. Really interesting question at the IIRSM conference last year was, when was the last time you saw the job stop because somebody voiced a health and safety concern? And there were 150 people sitting in that room and nobody put their hand up. So that tells us very clearly that we still have a way to go around this whole leadership issue. So I still firmly believe in terms of a sector challenge, leadership should be a real focus for us through 2020 and 2021. And that will have an inherent effect if we can make that change around engagement. Now, in terms of sort of business challenges, I think I'm probably better handing that one off to Matthew, and Matthew can talk about it from a sort of CEO perspective.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like most other businesses, as a business, we're facing the challenge of big uncertainty. So how big and how long is the impact of COVID going to be? I think at the moment we're sort of past the eye of the storm. We're sort of starting to get a sense of what living life under COVID is like, but we haven't yet seen, I don't think, the full economic consequences. So one of the challenges, of course, for me as CEO is engaging with our own employees, which I know all of our customers are facing that challenge as well. Being very honest about what we know and we don't know. We're very fortunate that we're in a very strong position as a business with a very loyal customer base. We're used to working from home. All of our systems are cloud-based, so we didn't have a big transitional challenge. But there is inevitably, the need to keep staff engaged, to make sure that everybody understands what the plans are for the business, and to make sure that we have enough kind of contingency and alternative plans to make sure that we continue to be successful. We're very lucky that we've got a very solid business and a very solid solution, which is, of course, extremely relevant in the current environment. So we're looking to build on those strengths and to bring the value of Assure and of our business to more customers.
Now, I do want to. Sorry,
I was just going to chip in as well. Sorry, Mark. Just on that, we've got quite a nice problem to have, which is, as a business, we've still been recruiting through the last sort of 2 or 3 months, and an interesting challenge is the onboarding and the induction of people when you can't actually meet them. So we've actually got several new members of staff who have never physically met any of their colleagues yet. But what we've had to do is come up with imaginative ways and different ways of actually training those people and inducting them when we can't get them all into a room together, for example, to do some training around things like IIRSM or health and safety.
Yeah, and I do want to talk about how you can help our listeners to this. I mean, and I'll come back to it in a second, but something that Julian said at the start, I know a couple of the real passion areas that you and I have worked on in the past in terms of webinars, and you've kind of covered them a minute ago. You touched on it. We did do a webinar on the leadership challenge, and we did also do one on how you can ensure that your employees truly have a safety voice. Those are the two that we did earlier this year, and as I said at the start of this interview, please do listen to these again on demand. Just go to the HSM website, which is hsmsearch.com, and click on the webinars tab on the right hand side, and you can watch them completely free. And some really interesting statistics that Julian gave in there, and the IOSH conference example was just one of them. But if we just move back, just in closing, to a final question, a lot of people will be needing help, and so I'm a business owner. We're always looking to try and bring people back into work safely. How can people get in touch with you to see how you can help them? What's the best way to get in touch?
I think the easiest way is to just visit our website, shesoftware.com. On there are various ways to find out more information, getting in contact with us, and of course you can sign up to Assure Response, where we're offering 60-day free trial, and that offers a great set of functionality around all of the needs that you have around assuring a safe return to work for your employees.
Well, thanks for joining us, gents. It's always great to see you, Julian. Thanks for your time, Matthew. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you.
Good
Bye-bye.
to speak again.
And that's all we've got time for in this episode of the Health and Safety Matters podcast. If you can't wait for another fortnight till the next podcast comes out, which is every fortnight on a Monday, you can see all the latest news on our website or on Twitter. Our website is www.hsmsearch.com, and as I've said throughout the podcast, we've got a number of new CPD opportunities for you where you can gain CPD hour by going back on our past webinars, and the on-demand service offers 1 hour CPD if you listen to those. So just go onto the webinars tab of our website, and you can of course listen to those on demand completely for free. And we've got an upcoming webinar on the 7th of July that I mentioned with 3M at Work at Height. That's at 10:30 on the 7th of July, and we do hope that you'll register and join us then. Our thanks today to the Health and Safety event for being our sponsors. As I mentioned right at the start, you can register to attend the Health and Safety event completely for free. It takes place on the 22nd and 23rd of September 2020 at the NEC in Birmingham. And if you want to register for free, you just go to www.healthandsafetyevent.com. Hopefully you've enjoyed this edition. Please do leave us positive feedback on iTunes or Google Play or Spotify or YouTube. Please do spread the word to your colleagues and friends so they can enjoy this as well. You can, of course, subscribe for free to receive Health and Safety Matters magazine 6 times a year, or to go to our twice-a-week newsletter. Again, that's just in the usual website address that I said quite a few times in this episode, hsmsearch.com. And thanks for joining me today on this edition of the Health and Safety Matters podcast. We look forward to seeing you next time.